Alright, we're back. We're talking some FF7. We're talking some Rebirth, and we're here to look at this new interview, with Hamaguchi and Kitase. And I put air quotes around new for a reason because it is technically new. It's literally new, I guess, because it's new to us, but it is from last year. It's from early 2024, and after something we're going to talk about here in a second, it's potentially like exactly a year old. It's kind of a weird situation because I don't know why they're posting this video now. Like, did they fucking record the interview last year and forget to post it? Because, like, why are we posting a fucking year-old interview from, like, before the launch of Rebirth? It's kind of strange. But the reason why I knew it was an older interview, even before I looked at, like, the description of the video, is because of the horrendous sweater that Hamaguchi's wearing that I wanted to make a comment on last year, because they did a video with Game Informer. We did 129 rapid-fire questions. We, of course, covered that and went through all the interesting question and answers from that. And I wanted to make a comment when I was doing the video about that sweater because it's just weird looking to me. But I didn't want to do my guy Hamaguchi dirty like that, so I failed to mention it in the video, but I didn't expect the sweater to come back and haunt me, so here we are, and I had to draw attention to it because goddamn. I mentioned this interview potentially being a year old, and I say that because the Game Informer 129 questions video was posted on January 19th last year, so exactly a year old today. Now this video was posted on YouTube like 2 days ago on January 17th. I don't know exactly when the interviews were done versus when they're posted, but the same sweater in both videos, right? So something like a year old interview. Anyways, in terms of the actual video we're looking at today, I don't know what all's worth talking about from it. I have seen Shinra Arc, I believe, put out a few quotes from it. So there's at least maybe a few things to discuss. It's a 16-minute video. I'm entirely sure what all could be interesting from an interview that took place last year prior to the release of FF7 Rebirth, but we'll see.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Jay Curtis. I'm a digital sales manager here at Square Enix. Of course, with me is Megan Pelt, a digital sales manager. Megan, you have some very distinguished guests with you today. Who's with you?
Some friends today. So we have Hamaguchi-san and we have Kitase-san with us today.
First question and answer thing is to Kitase, and it's about people that, haven't played Final Fantasy or FF7 and are hopping into it for the first time with Rebirth. Something we've seen a lot, talked a lot about over the last year or so at this point, so we move on. The next couple question and answers, Kitase and Hamaguchi talk about essentially the world map. Hamaguchi talks more about story stuff as well, but again, nothing really to break down. We do love the world map and stuff when it comes to Rebirth, and I'm looking very much forward to the third game on how they improve upon it with the High Wind and actually maybe giving us a legitimate seamless open world where we can just travel from one continent to the next. That'll be great. But I mean, there's just nothing really to talk about because it's stuff we talked about. It's a year-old interview. But speaking of traveling from one continent to the next, I think it'd be pretty cool if they gave us the option to hop in the ocean and just swim, right? I mean, you already gave us the ability to swim in the game, and there's not a ton to do with it. There's things to be found in the world, right? But there's not a ton. Even if it take a long time, you already have potentially a seamless world in the third game. So why not let me swim from fucking Junon to Costa del Sol? Just let me do it. Maybe if you want to make it a bit faster, you have to be riding a chocobo to do that, but at least let me do that just so the world feels kind of realistic and to scale, because it does take a while, even with the tiny Bronco, to go from Costa del Sol to Junon or something, right? It's a bit of a drive. So if you were doing it by swimming or on the back of a chocobo, it would take even longer. So I just think it'd be kind of a cool way to make the world feel large. Hamaguchi's then asked what kind of unique style or perspective does he bring to FF7 Rebirth as the director, and he mentions being a fan of the original, which is something I do appreciate. It's kind of a unique thing to have with the remake project, is having Hamaguchi on board as a director with the games and stuff, but he's a fan of the original, and then you also bring in some of the original dev team, which he does mention.
やっぱり今回で開発ってその原作のクリエイターである北瀬だったり野村だったり野島鳥山っていうところのスタッフはいるんですけど、逆にその原作を当時ファンであった観点で視点で見れるっていうところは、やっぱりなんだろうな、その観点で見たときに、ここはやっぱりユーザーから見てやっぱ守ってほしいだろうな、みたいなところを、まさに原作のクリエイターたちと、やりとりできるっていうところが、やっぱり私の一番の役割だと思ってたので。
That's just a nice combination that I like, is having, the people who worked on the original Final Fantasy VII, but also having somebody that was a fan of the original FF7 who's actually kind of at the helm, right? The director of the game. So it's kind of a nice combination. He does talk about, wanting to preserve, aspects of the original game that a fan would want preserved, but there's definitely some stuff missing, and there's some things that don't hit as good for me as they did in the original game, like the dying segment. I'm always going to throw it out there. I don't think it's a bad segment necessarily in the game, but they just handled it wrong, especially after the dying segment, right? Immediately going into the Palmer fight and shit. There's just things like that. If we're talking about some things being mishandled or not preserved as they were in the original FF7, you got to mention the air segment, right? For me, a lot of people out there, the ending of the game just didn't hit. So there's some things that were definitely some misses, but kind of overall, I think Rebirth was done amazingly out of this game. Kitase's then asked about like inspiration when it comes to the original FF7 and also carrying on into the remake project and how that's all done. It's not really necessarily interesting up to a certain point where he does talk about how with the original game they didn't really depict how the world is run by Mako, and they do that a lot better with the remake project, and he points out like all the pipes that you see around the world, which is
そのマコエネルギーで成り立っている世界という設定があったんですけど、そのなんだろうな、マコが世界を支えているっていう描写がまだ足りない部分があると思ってたので、その辺をこうしっかりとこう今作のリメイクプロジェクト全体ではその背景のそのデザインの中でもうちょっとそれを示してくれないかと思ってたので、結構カーブのそのところにパイプがマコを供給するパイプがつながったりとか、そういう描写は原作に比べて結構増えてるので、よりその
It's one of those details that I don't think is necessary, but it is something that I very much appreciate. Like, if I even thought about it at all while I was playing the game, I would have maybe just assumed that like the source of Mako was underneath each town. That's why they built the town on top of it. But having the actual like Mako pipes kind of traversing the world and going from each location to the next, like, it is a nice detail to kind of show how Mako gets to each location. And as always, it's something I appreciate when it comes to the remake project is that attention to detail, that fan service, the things that aren't totally necessary. You could maybe argue that the Mako pipes are necessary, but I just don't think it's something I would have even really thought about until I've seen them. And then I see them and I know they're the Mako pipes. I'm like, holy shit, what a great detail.
Kitase-san, the characters are such a big part of why the original Final Fantasy VII story has endured for so long. Some people still have arguments surrounding Tifa and Aerith to this day. Where do you draw the line between letting characters tell their own unique spin on these classic characters versus telling a more defined story?
So this one, I think I've seen Shinark put a tweet out about, and essentially Kitase just says that, you know, they make the shit and they put it out there, and fans are kind of free to interpret however they want to, right? They
が世に出てしまうと、それ原作の時もそうですし、FF7 リメイクにした時もそうですけど、一度の作品が世に出た以降っていうのはやっぱりファンの皆様、プレイヤーの方がそこをどう感じたりとか、どうなんだろうな、そのストーリーではゲームでは描かれてない部分も含めてどう想像してもらえるかっていうのはやっぱりプレイヤーのそれぞれのプレイヤーがやっぱ自由ではあるので、そこは作る段階では 100% パーフェクトに描いてるつもりですけど、それ以上のプレイした方がそれ以上の解釈とかいろんな部分を思うのは自由だと思ってるので、そこはそういう思いでいます。
So I can kind of agree with the first part. The fans are allowed to like feel however they want to about the game or the characters and stuff. That's obviously a thing. That's like, it's objective. It's not a subjective thing. But in terms of like people being able to interpret the game or the story in different ways, I don't think that necessarily holds true for a Final Fantasy game, right? Especially like FF7. These aren't necessarily deep, thought-provoking games where there's like 3 or 4 possibilities and they're all technically true because the devs never like confirm anything. Like there's a fucking beginning and end when it comes to a Final Fantasy game, right? Again, going back to the ending of Rebirth, Aerith's fate, right? This is something they've talked about a lot in interviews that they want the community to discuss and debate and go back and forth on for the next however many years until the next game comes out. But it's like, no, Aerith died. Is she alive in these other worlds? I guess maybe, but what does that even mean, right? If that's the case, Zack's alive too, right? Like, so, you know, she's dead. She's dead in this world. In the world that Cloud and everybody's in, that they're going on their journey to fight Sephiroth in, she's fucking dead. There's no debate. There's no interpreting that in a different way.
Sephiroth holds a special place as one of gaming's most beloved antagonists. Why do you think he resonates with audiences so much?
Because he's hot. Next question. I'm only slightly joking, but of course the character model, you know, for Sephiroth is a good-looking guy. You know, I'd do him. Fuck. Hamaguchi goes on to mention how Sephiroth does have, like, you know, a tragic background, and you kind of see how he became the antagonist of the story. It's very human how that happened, and it's also very easy to understand, which I can all agree with.
なぜ彼が、今も全世界で悪役として非常に人気があるかっていうと、やっぱりその彼の背景というか、ただの悪役ではなくて、どうしてああいう立ち位置の感情に落ちていったかっていうところが、やっぱり非常になんだろうな、人間味があるというか、プレイヤー目線で見たときに、やっぱ非常にわかりやすくて、気持ちが結構シンクロするところっていうのは、ユーザーに刺さりやすいのと、あと、それと、
What I really liked about Rebirth is them showing more of like the human side of Sephiroth right before he turns evil with the first chapter. You get a bit of that in Crisis Core, and I think that was handled well too. But like one scene that always stuck with me after playing Rebirth for the first time, or I guess the demo, was whenever you fall into the river and, you know, they lose one of the troopers down the river, like Sephiroth's reaction on his face, like you can tell that actually bothered him, Which the Sephiroth that we know, it's like he wouldn't give a fuck, right? But back here, whenever he's kind of a good guy still, like he's actually affected by that loss. I don't think we need any more of that stuff. We don't need to like go back into Sephiroth's history and show good guy Sephiroth. We don't need to go anywhere towards the redemption arc possible shit. Like we get it. We get it's tragic what happened to him, but I need him to be the evil character that he is, right? Trying to destroy the world. I don't think they're gonna go like the route of redemption arc, which some people do think that's a possibility, but I'm just putting it out there, just speaking into the universe so it doesn't happen. I suppose the last thing worth mentioning from this interview is while Hamaguchi's talking about Sephiroth when he gets towards the end of it, he mentions the famous scene where Sephiroth, turns around and walks into the fire, and how like the expression he gives Cloud, there's a bit of sadness there, but he's like trying to be tough or whatever, I guess, trying to look badass or cool or something. I never got the vibe of him looking sad. I don't know if that came across well in the game for anybody else. Maybe you guys noticed that Sephiroth was sad in that scene, but I didn't.
ブルヘイム回想のところのセフィロスのこう表情一つとってもなんかこうなんだろうなこの炎にこう消えていくまあすごく有名なシーンだと思うんですけど、あの時のこうセフィロスのこう表情とかがまあクラウドにこうちょっとこう笑いかけるところとかがこうなんかあの中にでもちょっと寂しさもありつつもなんかこう強気なこうちょっと強がっているような表情もあるみたいななんかああいうのってやっぱりこう
It's kind of interesting to know that he's meant to be sad in that moment. That kind of adds to the tragedy of the situation, at least for him. I mean, there's another tragedy happening where he's fucking killing everybody. So I don't really care that he's sad in that moment, but I guess that is interesting to know.
Kitase-san, Hamaguchi-san, thank you so much for joining us today.
ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。
My dudes is indeed the video. We kind of skipped over a good chunk of this stuff, and I tried to add to some of the shit to make the video a little more interesting because there wasn't like a ton here. Like I guess the most interesting thing from this would have been, I guess, the sad Sephiroth thing at the end. Like that's I guess the most like interesting bit of info from that. I can kind of see why maybe they kept this interview in the vault for the last year or so. I don't know why they released it now, but here we are. Anyways, that is the video. Subscribe to the guys and news system. Work in the description below. Follow me on Twitter. _YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in